We are going to be talking about engaging new donors. We have a very wonderful panel who President Jim Mergiotti from Peirce College here will introduce in a minute. My name is Arun Prabhakaran. I'm the Vice President and External Affairs Officer for the Coalition. I want to thank you for coming today. Coalition U is designed to help nonprofits in their capacity building needs, helping them develop leadership and offer low-cost professional development. As we all know in the sector, the professional development resources are scarce, and especially ones tailored to the specific needs that organizations most often seek. So we've been doing a series of these. The first one was in January, social media. Second one was around crowdfunding in February, and now we're here today to talk about how you're going to engage donors. So we're going to have a schedule moving forward. Felicia will tell you a little bit more about our next one. I think we're calling it How to Make Your Appeal Letter Sing. I might not nail the title, but so again, if you're not familiar with the Urban Affairs Coalition, we are a coalition of over 55 programs and 15 projects. We provide fiscal sponsorship as a way to help organizations save money, time, and effort, and put their money back in their mission, so they can continue to focus on what they do best, which is serving the community. Most of our work really falls in three major areas. We improve life chances for youth and young adults. About 80% of our programming is around youth. We are focused on building wealth in urban community. We've had decades of partnership with the banking industry, with community-based organizations, trying to make sure that economic opportunities are spread throughout the community and especially to those who need them the most. And we also spend a lot of time with efforts like these strengthening the nonprofit sector. So with that, I want to just encourage you to take full advantage of our very esteemed panel and discussion that we have today. And I want to introduce our moderator for today. So this is Jim Mergiotti. He's president here at Peirce College. He's one of our board members. He's been here since, he's been a part of the Peirce community since 1998, but he became the president and CEO of the university in 2009. He led the college collaborative strategic planning effort in 2009 and 2010, focused on making Peirce the first career-oriented, a non-traditional college program that seeks to create high-quality teaching and service. He has over 35 years of experience in higher education. His background is in accounting and finance. He has an MBA from LaSalle and a bachelor's from St. Joe's. And I want to thank Mr. Mergiotti here and welcome to moderator.
All that means is that I'm not too young. I've been around a while, but welcome to Peirce College, and welcome to Coalition U. It's great to have you here today. I'm very excited. You know, fundraising is part of my business as a college president, and having the opportunity to hear from these three panelists today really has me excited. I think you are as excited as I am. Let me start out by giving you a brief introduction of these fine folks. There is a complete description of their backgrounds in the package, but just a few highlights, if I may. So to my left here, Lynn Marie Johnson Porter, Executive Development, Major Gifts, and Clinical Support at CHOP at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. So Lynn is an external relations professional with more than 15 years of experience in development, annual giving, and corporate foundation relations. Prior to working at CHOP, Lynn worked as Vice President of Philanthropy for Presby's Inspire Life. At the core of her professional experience is her background in journalism, which led to her dynamic engagement as a news writer and producer at KYWTV3. Her academic career spans time at Temple, Penn State, and Villanova University. So welcome, Lynn. It's great to have you here. And then seated to Lynn's left is Aimee Lipman, Esquire, who is Executive Director of Children's Scholarship Fund, Philadelphia. Prior to joining the Children's Scholarship Fund, Aimee was the Executive Director of the Peggy Browning Fund, a nationally based nonprofit organization serving law students and workers' rights groups. Aimee is an attorney with an extensive background in educational advocacy and organization building. She's worked for groups that have included the Greater Philadelphia First Children Achieving and Health Partners. She has a BA from the University of Connecticut and a JD degree from Temple University School of Law. So,
sorry, we won.
That's right. Yeah, my hat goes off to the UConn hockey designer. Yes, you got it. So seated to Aimee's left is Aimee Miller, who's Senior Vice President and Partner at Fairmount Ventures. Aimee has over 18 years of experience in program design and assessment, development and business planning, and fundraising from all sectors to advance nonprofit organizations' resource capital and capacity needs. Her focus includes advising clients, including Peirce, by the way, on developing and executing strategies to increase revenues from a range of private, public, and earned income sources. She has an extensive background in media and cultural criticism through past work in public radio and journalism, including at WXPN-FM in Philadelphia and the Washington Post. Aimee holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Pennsylvania. So welcome, Aimee. So it's time to get into the panel discussion, and I have to read some of the rules. But our objective today is to obtain the best practices from these great minds who can really help us in attendance today. So they'll share with us things that they've learned through their experiences in terms of what works and what does not work so well. So we've divided today's discussion into 4 segments. Number 1, prospecting for new donors. Number 2, ways to engage new donors. 3rd, cultivating relationships with existing donors. And lastly, closing the deals and securing the funding. So we're going to find them, we're going to wine and dine them, and then we're going to get money from them. That's how this is going to work today. Does that sound okay? So each segment is 20 minutes in length. We've integrated some of your questions from the registration survey into the discussion already. However, if you have additional questions, there will be time at the end of each segment to ask them, or you can tweet throughout the session your questions and comments to the hashtag #CoalitionU. So please feel free to do that. And I'll remind you throughout that you can tweet. So we'll start with the first segment, and that's around prospecting for new donors. And I'll ask the first question of the panel, which is, what is the first rule on finding and prospecting for new donors? I don't know who wants to take that first, but please jump in.
Ask your board. I think one of the first rules is really to work within the circles you already have and really make simple requests, but direct requests. Your board's primary function is, even though they think it might be otherwise, is to help you with the fundraising and help introduce you to people. So it's much easier not to cold call and go through endless lists. So you talk with your board. If you don't have the kind of board that is interested in doing that, start looking for new board members to join the existing board so that you expand those options, and then just work through those existing lists. And that's really the best way to begin.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think one of the most effective things that I've done is to leverage the board relationships by factoring into the board's role and responsibilities the expectation that they identify new prospects for your organization. Start with 1 or 2. Make it easy for them so they don't feel like they have any chance for failure. And then, multiply it out from there. Ask the board to identify new members, ask those new members to make recommendations of existing friends, associates, and contacts as well.
I would absolutely agree with that. A couple of things. I think starting with a handful of names that the board can give is a good way to engage them, and also make sure you close the loop with them. So if the prospect names that they give in turn make a donation to your organization, make sure you let that board member know so they can thank that person personally and feel empowered and engaged and want to do more. I also think that you can really expand that circle to anybody who's connected with your organization who cares about the mission. So, your existing donors and your major donors are good sources of potential prospects. So reaching out to them and asking them if they know 1 or 2 other people who they think would care about the organization, be willing to sit down with you, take a tour, learn more about what you're doing. Your volunteers, even the people that you're serving, your clients, can all be ambassadors and connect you with other people who care about your organization.
And if you're starting from scratch, I started with 2 new startup organizations so that we didn't have a natural base of donors outside of the founding donors. Go to parallel organizations and look at their board lists and start to do outreach to those board members, because one of the most important tenets is you want to find people that share the mission and share that value, and those would be natural potential donors.
You know, you actually segued into the next question, so I'll ask it and see if there's anything that you want to add. But the next question that we had was, how can we move beyond people who are already connected to our organization and have them help us reach new customers?
I think visibility raising is really important. Sometimes that doesn't immediately translate into new donors, but just making sure that your organization is getting your name out there, whether it's through community events, through partnerships and collaborations, through media strategies, making people aware that you exist and able to learn more about your mission. If you have community events or other opportunities to engage with people, do everything you can to capture their information. So making sure you have sign-up sheets, making sure it's easy for someone to go to your website and sign up for an e-newsletter. Just starting to gather addresses or email addresses is a good way to kind of get people engaged in your communications, which leads to more money.
Events are an excellent way of doing that. I remember early in my career when I was working, I think it was Penn State, one of the things that we did, and we did quite well, was an executive briefing series. And what we would do is have our CEO or our president invite maybe 6 or 7 executives from throughout the area to hear more about what the organization was doing and more importantly, the impact the organization was having in the broader community. That was quite effective, and we challenged the directors of development then to follow up with those who were in attendance to get their feedback, first of all, but also to engage them in some more significant ways.
I concur with events that you can start to make almost a highlight where it's a unique niche, and we started that early on in both startups where it's something that is interesting to potential donors, but it also catches the eye of the press, and then becomes signature events. We just completed, we give out scholarships to children, and realized that in the process of issuing these scholarships, there's a lottery, and it was an automatic way to get the donors in the room making calls to the actual people receiving the scholarships, and prospects. So it was a great way to reinforce our message with the experience, direct experience, and I think that's always important for prospects to have with an organization. And it was a natural event that the press wanted to cover because it's a real human interest story.
So the last question that I'll ask in this segment from the list here is, how can one determine the best prospects for support? Underline the word best.
I think it's anybody who cares about your mission. I think it's really about connecting, finding people who are genuinely excited about the change that your organization is trying to achieve. First, I think being able to articulate what change you're trying to achieve and what your vision is for your organization, and then finding like-minded people and giving them an opportunity to invest in what you're doing.
I also think that it can be dangerous to think that best relates to gift capacity, what someone's able to give. I think some of the best donors and volunteers I've ever worked with are, again, those who wanted to remain involved in the organization for the long term and who may not necessarily have the tremendous capacity to make a transformational gift, but who have the ability, the passion, and desire to make a difference. Those are the best prospects.
I agree with all that. The one thing that I think helps you find your best prospects is always to be cognizant of what is the product you're trying to sell, and not think of it strictly in nonprofit terms. Think of it as something that has value, and you should always work to refine that product and make sure it's impactful, because if you're strategic about what you are trying to improve, whatever that is, it is really the best way to secure prospects and donors. And I think sometimes in the nonprofit world we forget that we do have products we're selling, and you have to pay attention to that, and that's part of your marketing.
We did have one audience question that came from the surveys, so I'll start with that one and then I'll open it up to the floor. And that question was, how do we hook donors not now associated with archaeology. So one of our attendees is in the archaeology field and is looking to find donors not now associated with that field.
That's a tough and precise question. I mean, without knowing anything about the organization or kind of what the focus is, it's a little tricky. I mean, I guess there are different ways of thinking about possibly expanding. I guess it would be about reframing what you're doing in ways that might appeal to certain donors. So someone might not be interested in archaeology per se, but they might be interested in specific populations that, of students that you're engaging through your program. You can think about it from a sort of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics angle. If your programs engage youth or have youth outreach programs to introduce them to archaeology as a field, school populations that might not view that as a traditional path, that could be a way to engage people. So just thinking maybe more expansively about the work that you're doing and kind of matching that with what donors would be interested in.
I agree. Taking maybe the educational component and piggybacking on what Aimee said, appealing to donors that want to educate certain populations and just expanding it out.
So we'll open it up to the floor for this segment.
I just wanted to just piggyback on what you were saying, because I worked for the Park Service, and they have archaeology classes for teachers. They have always a controversy with archaeology, the President's House. My students worked on that for 5 years. So I mean, there are a lot of things right here in Philadelphia. I'm not from this city. There's a whole lot of digging going on.
I'm actually from the Institute for Southeast Asian Archaeology, and that's where the question came from. I'm a volunteer with them, but it's Southeast Asian archaeology. It's in Laos. It's in northeastern Thailand. I think the education, and it's a legacy program that became a nonprofit out of probably 30-some years of work that's been done at the Penn Museum. So I think, yes, all the ideas of taking like one step away from direct interest and looking at indirect interest, I think that's a great way to go. It's a good food for thought.
Yes.
I wanted to ask about memberships versus fundraising, and whether there's an issue with your memberships, which my organization does not currently have, but we're kind of considering it, kind of cannibalizing your fundraising, which probably doesn't happen. And so, like, asking someone to be a member for $50 every year. Can you talk about why you would do that versus why you wouldn't do that? Or is it too general?
No, I think asking and receiving denotes exact interest in your organization. The strategy beyond the actual writing of the check for the membership is engaging that person in a way to get philanthropic support, and that's where you have to be a little bit more creative. But I do think it's a great introduction of opening doors. You already know that this person has an interest, or this family has an interest in being involved. You just have to take it beyond the actual membership and define ways and outline ways and strategies for securing their long-term involvement.
Right, I think building on that, and membership is often transactional, so someone gets a discount to your programs or events in exchange, so it's a good way to, again, get someone in the door who's maybe new to the organization or interested. And the key is really sort of deepening their engagement so that they don't simply see, a one-to-one, I get a discount or I get this benefit, but that they really start to come to see the value of the organization. So building a membership program that is experiential and personal for someone, as well as kind of focused on those discounts, and is another way to kind of move them up a loyalty pipeline.
But you have a tremendous advantage once they do agree to be a member. You're not cold calling. They understand what you're about. They're sort of inviting you to bring them in a little bit more deeper.
You mentioned the press. I don't mean, sometimes you organize an event, everything's all lined up, and the press never shows. What did they do wrong?
They didn't do
Anything wrong? They were busy.
They're
We have media people here.
Right.
That's why I'm
They're getting
asking.
the truth.
You can have the most most ideal event and circumstance, and then you have a plane,
Disappear.
we, on our lottery day, we had the plane that got a smoky, tiny story, or it can be a snowstorm. You almost have to look at events on a year-long calendar and do enough media events that some will hit. You also can't forget the power of written press and community papers, so it may not be, the TV stations are very fleeting and you can embed their coverage in your website, but having a piece of paper from a community article in your packet is always of value and a lot less tricky because they don't have to come to the event. You do a press release and can engage in that way.
Hi. First, welcome. I'm so glad that everyone could come today. I know we sort of talked about trying to find people that either you know or someone knows, but is there any time that's a good time or any set of circumstances that makes sense to do cold calling? Have you ever done cold calling where it's been successful?
I do cold calling all the time. The one thing, if you're going to do cold calling, one, you can't take it personally. Two, you have to know you're going to be like a behavioral rat. You'll keep pecking away at the food box, and maybe once out of 20 times you'll get a hit. But in my business, we're cold calling a lot of companies, not individuals, because there's a tax credit available, and if we get through, the dollars are significant. So we've had a lot of success, but unless you plan to be consistent and persistent with your calls and follow up when you get the answering machines and call back in a couple of weeks, it's going to be a waste of your time. Don't take it personally. Keep calling until you have a big slam of the door. A moderate slam of the door doesn't count, and just be tenacious. And be creative in how you're developing your lists. When you're cold calling, make sure you really do a little research ahead of time to try to get to the best person possible in that organization. And a lot of times, it may sound trite, but it is the administrative assistant who write down that person's name, remember any detail with that person, and they are really good people to gain access to who you're trying to get to.
All right, 50% of the battle is getting the appointment.
Yeah.
Any advice on doing that?
Sometimes a pre-call letter works. Writing a letter introducing yourself and stating why your organization is worthy of the attention of this person. Writing the letter indicating that you'll be following up, date, time, making the call, and trying several times to get through. That works for you too?
Were there any questions to me, Felicia?
Right
Are
here.
there others?
Which is a good segue into my question that I've had since the discussion began, and to piggyback on what Charmaine had just said. Social technology versus hard copy direct mail. Which one is still rule? Which one is still king?
My answer is it depends. What I've found is that different audiences prefer different methods of communication. Currently, social media at CHOP works very well. In my previous experience of working for a senior service-related organization, I found that the mail worked most effectively. My prospects and my donors would wait for my letter and welcome the call following. So I try to be cognizant of where someone is in their particular span of life and using that to guide my behavior.
I'm in that span of life. So my natural preference is in the written form by letter, but I also recognize their variables, and sometimes the email, you need to be real timely and get something quickly to a prospect or donor because you've either just read something in the paper, there's an event that just happened, there's an acknowledgement you want faster than the mail. So I agree that you combine it and make it a generational thing as well.
Right. I think it's about knowing your donor base and sometimes testing and seeing what happens. You might want to segment your donor base, send some a letter with a follow-up email, send some an email, and see, see what hits in terms of a formula for that.
Other questions from the floor on the first segment? We'll move on to number 2.
Just one question.
Oh, please, Rachel. So this was tweeted?
Yeah.
So, okay, as a very young organization that has been solely funded on grants, how can we transition into an independent funding program?
Goes back to the board, get a good board organized. Having been in that position with 2 organizations, you grow organically, so it doesn't happen overnight, but you slowly broaden your base so that you're not dependent on one funding source. That's always really important because you're vulnerable if you depend on one major donor. My national organization, unfortunately, was very dependent on one national funder, and you can't do that, and they're sort of having to regroup. Same, with a small local organization, it's good to get your startup funds through one channel, but don't depend on it that way, and just keep growing organically.
I would just add to that too, always be careful to be transparent with your board as you're recruiting new members. If there's an expectation for donations and private giving, then you have to spell it out when they're recruited. Nothing's more frustrating than coming on a board and then finding out afterwards that you're expected to make a significant contribution. So make sure that's very clearly articulated in your meetings and in all your documentation at the recruitment stage.
And I would just say, make sure you're asking. Make sure that the people, that you're serving or your community knows that you rely on donations. So get the word out there that you need donations and make it easy for people to give, to find ways to donate via your website or other tools. So just always be asking.
Okay. Other questions?
Actually, kind of answered it. So if the question repetitive, I'm sorry, but I understand the return of board members. I tried to get a board, and when I did it, I did the downfall. I asked friends I knew, which doesn't work. And when you tell you want to try to do something, help your community and things like that, given time, you say, all right, we'll be there. You'd be the only one, at the restaurant drinking, and you wait for everybody else to come up, show up. So basically, my question, you kind of answered in terms of recruiting, maybe finding people that you don't know, maybe you have similar interests and things like that nature. My question is more so the process, maybe putting a questionnaire out, maybe looking for different people. I mean, do you ask politicians, or would that be because they're in government? Would that work, or would there be a conflict of interest? That's what I'm saying.
As much as I say, get a great board, there are also in between steps before you get that great board, and that's why organizations are so organic and startups are not there. They're here so that don't beat yourself up either if your initial board is a pragmatic board that you need to gather of your friends. Once you get that base and you get your product up and running, you will become more attractive to that next layer of a board. So you can't start everything at once, so you don't get frustrated that my board isn't opening all these financial doors. That may not be your first board that you get going.
Right.
And it's thinking about what skills you might need on your board. So if your board is more active and more of a working board and doing hands-on support to extend the capacity of staff versus a board that, say, only meets quarterly or a couple times bi-monthly and is a little less removed from the work of the organization. So again, thinking about it from a skill set standpoint, and then finding people with those skills who also are invested in the mission.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to touch a little bit on the idea of most of us talk about fundraising, but a big part of sort of getting there is about friend raising, right? Really trying to find people that maybe you're not going to get them on your board the first time, you get a chance to meet with them. But at some period of time, you start to think about where's the right place for that person within your organization. So can you talk a little bit about strategies that you've used around fundraising, where maybe you aren't asking for $1 yet, but you are trying to create that relationship?
I'll start. One of the statements that I hear over and over again in my head is, ask for advice, you get money. Ask for money, you get advice. So when you're fundraising, be careful or be cognizant of the fact that you're trying to reach a broad base of individuals. And so you need to develop a strategy for all the places and institutions with whom you need to engage. And subsequent to that, what's important to do is determine who's the best contact person to reach this particular person. Write it down, set some parameters and some deadlines, and then begin to outline in written fashion the strategies for engaging those individuals. It might be attendance at an event. It might be placing a call to someone to ask them to review a document that you're putting together. It might be inviting them to serve as a guest at a board meeting that you're having. It's a non-threatening way of engaging them and enlightening them to your needs and the opportunities that they have if they were to consider future involvement with your organization.
Yeah, I think calls to action, whether it's for an individual that you're cultivating for a leadership position or just a general base of, say, social media followers that you want to start to deepen their connection with the organization, are really good ways to get people engaged. So whether that's, hosting, an in-kind donation campaign to get somebody in the habit of connecting with the organization prior to them making a first donation, having people write letters, respond to policy campaigns. There's lots of different ways that you can initiate those calls, again, for groups of people or more strategically for an individual to deepen their connection.
Was there another one? Yes.
In your solicitation letter from your board, is it professional versus unprofessional, acceptable versus unacceptable to name drop, for example? I've had people question who was on my board, and that had people join versus people that maybe under other circumstances probably would not have.
Name dropping is good, as long as the names are good. It's like buying a house when there are a lot of people competing to bid on a house. It's part of marketing. So people like to know other people that they respect or involved in your organization. Don't keep it a secret. It's just a fundamental part of the marketing.
Yeah, there were times I felt that was the only thing that brought them in. The fact that I did that, but I felt
I
kind
get
of
asked
bad
to be
about
on
it.
boards from time to time. I look at the list of existing board members as the second step. The first step is, do I like the leader? The Charmaine passed those tests. Other questions on the first topic? We can move to number 2. That's great. Good discussion. Excellent job. Remember, you can tweet questions on #CoalitionU. So please make sure that you do that. So we're going to move to number 2, which is ways to engage them. So we've prospected now. Now we're going to engage them. Okay, so we're in step 2 here. So my first question from the list here is, what strategies are effective to encourage a nonprofit social media followers, volunteers, and members to make a first-time contribution?
I think one key to getting people who are connected to the organization but aren't donors to start to donate is to really make them feel that any contribution they give at any level is valuable and is going to advance and help the organization. Your first-time donors aren't going to be your major donors. They're going to start small, and the goal is to cultivate them and sustain and build them and build their giving over time. So really, again, being able to think about what you do and the needs that you have for fundraising and present that in a way that is barrier-free, I think, for those populations is really helpful. One strategy that I'm, in addition to my consulting work, I'm also on a board of a nonprofit, and one strategy we found really effective because we have a large volunteer and supporter base was to launch a monthly sustainer campaign. So if someone gives as little as $5 a month, that's a $60 a year donation. That's dedicated cash flow month to month to your organization, and it makes them feel like they are doing a different, making a difference and and supporting the organization more deeply. So that's one effective strategy that clients and my direct board work I've found to be really great.
Any others? Okay, well said. Great. Okay. So next question, when do donors become more committed to an organization?
When they feel valued and appreciated.
How do you do that? How do you make them feel valued and appreciated?
Tell them they're valued and appreciated. Yeah.
That helps, I guess.
As basic as it is, you need to thank donors in a really timely way whenever they give you a gift. And I have heard complaints from donors about other organizations that have failed to send a timely thank you, and for significant gifts. And this is so basic. Don't let it be an impediment to your organization. You get a gift, by the next day you get a thank you out, no matter what the size. And try to always sign in blue ink. Now, I was told that early on so that people realize it's not a form signature, personalize it, you know. Do what you can, take that extra 20 seconds to make that person feel valued at that first contact point.
And also, I think it's helpful to involve others in the acknowledgement process. President, CEO, other volunteer, board member, family of the person being helped, for example. Lots of times at the hospital, we receive a donation, we have a child write a letter or a parent write a letter just to acknowledge that level of contribution. So you can never thank someone too much.
I'm going to take 4 questions.
Just a quick follow-up question. Is that an email thank you note? Apparently it is not. Oh, Lord. Okay.
No, for a lot of reasons, that's where my generation rules. Get a letter out, both for tax purposes and taking that extra step to say you value them. It's too easy to send an email. It's not good.
Not unless they ask for it. Somebody
Yeah.
asks for it.
Then they're not much interest.
Right. And you can have a standardized letter that you've got that's ready to go, and it's just as simple as writing an additional thank you so much for your support, you know, as on the side of the letter. So it just, again, is more personalized.
Thank you, you're helpful.
Okay, this is the first audience question that came from the survey. I actually am looking forward to the answer to this too. This comes from a CEO who's asking, as a new CEO, how do I increase my organization's visibility to donors interested in our work? Even as a not-so-new CEO, that question is on my mind every single day. So I will ask our panelists to respond on that.
Well, I think, you know, we talked about this a little bit before, maybe in the first section, around visibility raising. So if you have a facility that is showable in any way, organize tours, get people in the building, let them see the work that you're doing on the ground. You know, that can be, I think, you know, there's a great idea about the executive roundtables, whether it's a smaller group of leaders or major donors that you're trying to cultivate around specific topics, or just general kind of stock tours. Again, media strategies. I think if you're the CEO of a mission-driven organization, the ability to respond to trends in the news that are relevant to your organization. So whether you have the ability to write an op-ed and have that placed, or you are simply tweeting or Facebooking or kind of getting the word out about relevant issues, all those sorts of things elevate the organization.
It depends on what kind of organization you run. Very early on, for this organization I run now, I recognize that you can get your recipients of your support in a room at the same time as you create an event, so that the power of gathering, and initially it was gathering 400 people, and that becomes attractive to the media, and getting someone you can honor. It's just taking advantage of without taking advantage of your clients, just taking advantage of what you do to showcase it. So if you can gather a critical mass of people, naturally that are recipients of your organization and combine that with a press activity, you've got something going. So you just have to think outside of your box in terms of, you're obviously providing a service, but how can you combine it in a more creative way to be of interest to the press while you're showcasing your mission.
I also think if you're new as a CEO, take advantage of the fact that you're new. You get a pass with lapsed donors. You know, you can reconnect with people. You identify people out in the world that you want to meet with, and simply, you know, go to them, spend time with them, sit down and talk about your vision. Talk about what you're learning about the organization. See what they know and think about the organization. And again, that if you know, ask for advice first as a way to engage them and solicit their feedback.
Okay. Next audience question is, what are some proven strategies to get potential donors to support operating expenses instead of new projects? Buried in the annual budget.
You just start wearing tattered clothes, drive an old car, and begging always helps.
Also, finding a creative way to market the need for operational support, the fund for excellence, or the fund for innovation. Those are ways, but explaining eventually that it is operational support. But everyone understands that operating expenses need to be funded in some capacity, so don't be ashamed to articulate it as need.
And then the last audience question from the survey, and then we'll see what else we have from the audience today, is how do we get major contributions from people under 60 years of age?
Read the newspapers. I'm always scanning the newspapers, the business section. You know, start to look at people in terms of, even in the Philadelphia Inquirer, there you'll see stock transactions. You'll get a sense of where some money is, and there's a lot of very wealthy people under 60 in this community. But you have to do a little bit more research, and you always have to, you really have to pay attention to the news, because so many times you'll see someone on the front page, the business section, and they'll talk about their business, but then they'll talk about their interests. And that's where I can get a lot of leads, because they suddenly say they really love dog shelters, or, you know, just pay attention every day to the local papers, and even the journal, and just take those snippets and run with it.
I also think inviting their involvement in some capacity is important too. And then one of the strategies I've seen work very successfully is inviting a multi-year commitment from someone. You know, $25,000 may seem like a lot, but when spread over 5 years, it keeps that donor or that individual involved for a long term, and allows you to elevate their gift over time. So being flexible with your ask.
You said multi-level giving?
Multi-year
Multi-year.
commitments, yeah.
Okay.
It's like a payment plan on a gift.
Yeah.
We have a question from the floor.
Really quick question. When you see something in the newspaper and you feel like it might be a fit for whatever, you know, what would your next step would be?
Write a letter.
Okay.
And just say, people can't be acknowledged enough in terms of their accomplishments. You just stroke a natural ego and
Congratulate.
Yeah.
I read with great interest the
Yeah.
article about your recent investment or your recent
Cool.
purchase.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
So given the importance and power of information and data, how for like a small organization, what would be your suggestions on gathering, understanding, and using data, building databases, using software to build donor profiles, et cetera, you know, to kind of understand who you're giving to, or who's giving to you and who gives to you, if that makes any sense. And harnessing the power of data, especially as a small organization, you can't kind of hire out for that.
Well, I think there's two types of data. One is data about your impact and what you're trying to achieve. So I think, you know, being able to have some clarity around, again, kind of what your theory of change is as an organization and how you measure your effectiveness, and being able to share that data, whether it's hard quantitative data or more qualitative anecdotal stories about what you're doing with potential donors. And then, if I'm hearing you right, it's this idea of kind of capturing data about your donors' profiles, right? It's important to keep accurate data, as accurate as possible about donors. I think if you're able to kind of fill in that more qualitative information about their interests, what engaged them, do they volunteer as well as give to the organization, that's really going to help you build kind of rich profiles of the people that are supporting you, and be able to, if there's a news article or something relevant that has either happened at the organization or that's happened in the field, you can easily, send that, whether it's via email or via mail to that donor, or that sponsor with a personal note. So there are a lot of engagement strategies that can come from kind of building and keeping those profiles in place.
Are there other questions from the floor on engagement? Yes.
So I'm wondering if the panel can elaborate a little more on the personal effect that a letter from the direct recipient of the services that we provide makes. I've never tried that strategy.
It's powerful. We routinely try to supplement our communications with either letters from the kids that are receiving our scholarship, or having a parent present to a group, their perspective on what the impact has meant, to, what we had with Lottery Day, where families directly communicated their excitement when they just learned they got the scholarship back to our donors. So it's a very critical piece, because you want your prospects and donors to experience the impact of their philanthropy.
One of the other things that CHOP does often is invite a patient family to speak at an event. There's nothing more profound than hearing a 10-year-old talk about how a certain gift transformed their life or gave them a new opportunity for hope. I could say that, the president and CEO could articulate that, a board member could articulate that, but nothing more profound than hear it from the family who had the benefit of receiving such generous support as well.
We do that all the time in education, putting scholarship recipients together with donors and having the scholarship recipient tell their story. And it really works. Very effective. Okay. Other questions on engagement? Were there any tweeting? No? Okay. We will move to the third segment. Now we're going to cultivate.
Can I just get one question?
Yeah,
in
sure.
on the last one? What about the celebrities and sports figures? Is it wrong to target them in particular? In other words, to make them feel that they have a commitment?
Great question.
I have some biases about that. Go ahead. Let's hear them. My experience, and I certainly can't speak for everyone in this room, is that they're great to have. They will draw media, but they'll also cost you a lot of money. Invariably, when you invite them to attend an event, for example, they're not expected to pay. You often have to get a sponsor to fuel their costs or underwrite the costs that anyone else would normally pay. But as spokespersons, yes, they're great if you can get them, but it's challenging, I think. Not impossible, but challenging to get them at no cost to your organization. Do you agree? Yeah.
Cultivating relationships with existing donors. Remember that you can tweet questions to hashtag #KillListenYou during the discussion. So I'll start out with the suggested question. So what role can a board of directors play in cultivating donors? We talked about the board in every segment today. They certainly have a role in cultivation.
You should think about your board of directors as your ambassadors for the organization. So they should be thinking and talking about your organization kind of front and center when they're out in the community, and they really play a pivotal role in, again, kind of thanking your donors and making them feel valued. Anecdotally, a really powerful experience I had was making a donation to a nonprofit organization that very promptly sent me a standard thank you IRS letter. And about a week or two later, I got a handwritten card from a board member, and that really struck me. They had a system in place in which the staff probably, engaged board members, gave them a stack of note cards, gave them the names and addresses of donors, and just asked them to write a letter. That's all they needed to do. But it really had an impact on me as a donor. So that's one strategy, and just getting them involved in that process. Or if you have an annual event or a special event, assign your board members maybe 2 donors, and their job is to simply go up and have a conversation with them and thank them and solicit information about why they support the organization. So just kind of have them playing that circulating role is really pivotal.
And board members can be helpful in hosting events. I've seen where they may host a breakfast or a lunch, or open their own private residence for 10 to 20 individuals they think might have an interest in being actively involved in your organization. So that's also a good strategy for engaging.
Anything to add there?
They just about covered it. I think you want to make, your board is the ambassador for your organization. You constantly have to remind them of that role and reinforce that role for them, and always let them know of their success as a board member. So you've got to keep them in that loop of encouragement, because it's really uncomfortable for most people to ask for money, and it's uncomfortable to even be soliciting your friends more broadly, even if it isn't a financial ask. So you have to nurture your board relationship very much so that they're comfortable in that role, so that they'll continue to be reinforced to do the heavy lifting that you're asking them to do. And you need to make it as easy as possible for them. So you give them a draft solicitation letter that basically has all the language. You give them lists of potential prospects. Sometimes they run out of ideas in their Rolodex. So whether it's going through board lists of companies, local companies, and giving them names of members of corporate boards that you may want to get into those circles. Just make it easy. Don't overtax them and break down your goals for them to play.
Yeah, just a follow-up question for you folks, but training and development of the board around fundraising, should that be an annual event? Should it happen at orientation? What's it's something that certainly I wish I had done a better job of to date, and intend to do a better job of going forward, but just trying to get a better picture on that. Getting them, you talked about keeping them comfortable. Part of that is just having them feel like they have this skill set developed.
I would invest in some, I think you should do it annually. You can do something short of a strategic planning session, but the value of strategic planning isn't really, from my point of view, the plans that come out of them. It's the process of engagement. So you want to engage your board outside of fundraising in a way that has meaning for them, and then they deepen their relationship. So I'd say once a year you re-engage them as to what the organization's all about, where they can see improvement in the organization. You don't make them passive players in the governance of your organization. When you have a board meeting, don't read the agenda, don't just have it be this one-way dialogue. You need to value their time each and every time you have a meeting and get their input. So whatever you do when you're having your meetings, structure them in a way that you're really calling on them to be decision makers and people involved in the mechanics of the organization. Get your elevator speech for them so that they are really comfortable with the 30-second pitch. Don't leave them hanging. So that's part of your job in making it easier for them to advocate for your organization.
Right. And I think, whether it's annually, for sure, making sure that new members have that sort of elevator speech as well, that they can go out in the community and articulate what the organization is about. On an annual basis, you might want to equip the board with 2 or 3 core talking points about, these are our strategic priorities for the year. These are the areas that we're really looking to grow and attract new investment and donations information. So again, that they can go out and have that in mind as they're talking to people who are excited about the organization or interested in learning more. And making sure it's easy for them to connect people back. So if someone out in the community says, wow, that sounds like a great organization, how do I get involved? I'd love to volunteer. How do I make a donation? Have that board member, you know, again, make it easy for them to say, oh, you contact this individual, or have them, you know, tell staff and have the staff follow up. So again, having a process and clear lines of communication is really essential there.
It's also helpful on an annual basis to ask them what level of training they need. You know, how you can be helpful and supportive to them as they continue to be involved and evolve as volunteer leaders for your organization. So ask them, they'll tell you.
Okay. The next on the list of the suggested questions, why are sales techniques similar to donor relationship management?
It's all about sales, and if you start to distinguish yourself as just, I'm a nonprofit, I can't dirty my hands in marketing and doing all these things, you won't get where you need to get in terms of really fulfilling the mission of the organization. You have a product, it happens to be in a domain that is labeled nonprofit, but it's a product you're selling. At all times you're selling a product. So you have to be very aware of your customer base, you know, how you approach them, follow through, and really making sure you're delivering. You have to deliver what you say you're going to deliver, because the credibility and trust is probably even more important when it isn't a widget you're dealing with.
And great customer service will also lead to additional gifts and the closure of additional sales, so it's important to exercise that.
Good? Okay,
It's
good.
about relationship building.
It
I
is.
mean, again,
Yeah,
it's
no
just
question.
treating people, you know, very one-on-one in a very personal way, and being an active listener, you know, to what excites them and interests them about the organization, and then being able to match that to a need that exists for you as an organization as well.
Okay, if this is an audience question that came from the surveys, how do we turn one-time donors into sustained givers?
Thank them. Thank them, get them involved, keep them involved.
I just want to add something to what Lynn said about that, because I'm a part of an organization that I cannot get them to understand that. I mean, I have given money, I've gotten other people to give money. I doubled their fundraising in a couple of hours, and it's been 4 weeks, and I still don't have a thank you letter. I mean, what is it that,
It's really simple.
you know, it just, I mean, it seems, but I am really mad now. I didn't get my thank you letter.
Will you give again?
Well, I'm thinking about it, because I'm
Yeah.
saying, okay, how important was my gift if I didn't, you know, not only did I get a gift, I talked other people into giving more money, and there was no sense of ownership or acknowledgement of that. And I just wonder, they've got so far to go as an organization for fundraising. So I know, you know, we hear thank you, thank you, thank you, but I'll tell you, someone who sat on the other side of that, I'm feeling as if, you know, the gift wasn't valued, or they said they needed it, but did they really? I mean, all of those kind of things that sort of go into when you don't get, as a donor, you don't get acknowledged.
Right, and they almost don't deserve your continued support, and that's a clear example of how you'll lose a very valuable donor. You can't be entitled as an organization, and just because you're serving people in such an excellent way, you're entitled to a gift. You start having that kind of attitude, and it'll unravel.
And the other thing, just to add to your story from my own experience, is I made a contribution once to an organization that didn't cash my check for about 3 weeks. And you know, operationally, I think that ties into what you're saying, Charmaine. Operationally, you have to be sound to make sure that you're processing the check, processing the thank you letters, getting some notes of acknowledgement out.
And just to take it a step further, I think it's helpful also to articulate the impact of your gift. Thanks to your support of $25, we were able to ... Or letting the donor know that the gift was received, acknowledging it, and then stressing how impactful it was.
Absolutely. This gentleman's got a question.
One comment I wanted to make from my personal experience would be around thanking. That my personal experience, I run a nonprofit that focuses on volunteers, especially, like that's, I don't want to get into that too much off topic, but my personal feeling is that not only should you thank people to give money, people to give time as well. That there should be, that I volunteer a lot of places in the past, they don't thank at all, it's ridiculous. No, I don't think I've ever got a thank you note for just volunteering. And I personally feel that every single volunteer that comes into your nonprofit should get thanks. That and people give money, both, not just money. That's
Thank you for making that point. That is a very important point. It's a critical point. Yeah.
Two quick things. What if you have a sponsor, and it's happened a couple of years, he always gives to us every year, and when I say thank you, I call him personally. Yeah, say thank you. But he always say, don't worry about it. Just go ahead.
Worry about it.
That's what I'm saying, because I want to write him a letter. It's like, hey, he calls me up and say, what did you write this letter for? Just, you know what I do. So, that's always, every time I do something this year, I'm like, okay.
Right to live.
Always ready to live.
And I call him personally because, I know him for a long time. And that's another thing. So, and also, if you want...
Right, I'll write you the check this time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. If you want, I was going to say, if they don't give you a thank you letter, I'll write a bunch of thank you letters.
Okay,
You can
gotcha.
jump on board with us.
Smart guy.
I think that's another important point that you bring up, because your relationship with this donor is personal. You have a one-to-one relationship, but at some point you also want to transfer the relationship of that donor to the organization and not just to you. So if someday you leave the organization, is that person gonna still give, or are they going to not give because they only gave because you had that connection? So again, getting into that habit and kind of treating them formally and having those systems in place will help to maintain that support over the long term.
Okay.
Yes.
Tag on everything that was said, is that a way to do the damage control, especially when you forgot to send a letter or make the phone call to say thank you? Is there a strategic process for damage control?
I think every case is different. It's never too late, even if you've lost them temporarily as a donor, to say, I screwed up, I own it, I'm sorry, this shouldn't have happened, but I want to sincerely thank you at this point. Even if it's 6 months later, sometimes things happen and a check might have gotten buried, whatever, but I think if you own your mistakes, people are more forgiving.
Other questions on cultivation? Yes.
Would it be unrealistic to ask your board members for like a yearly contribution? And it's, well, not, okay, good. Well, what would be the max